Right, hey guys, how we doing? Back another video from Annie News. We've got another cut content video for the Overlord movie, which is cool. I love me some Overlord cut content. Let's find out what else was left out of the movie.
Not uncommon for Demiurge to weaponize royalty in the way of progress.
Mate, Demiurge is the best. He's so freaking smart, and he doesn't even know how smart he is because he always thinks that it's Irons that's like influencing him.
But I never thought he'd go so far as to do so literally. Out of all the cruel and savage acts we've seen him commit so far, this has definitely got to be one of the worst.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was
sure,
brutal.
It wasn't technically him who swung Kalka like a club, but it's hard to believe his summon came up with the idea himself.
Yeah.
Now, this whole mid-invasion sequence was actually preceded by some pretty important cut content, since it should have been time spent introducing the characters most crucial to the Holy Kingdom. Like, the Queen's history and leadership was given context, Remedios' rash attitude was given justification, and her sister was far more valuable than the movie made her seem. It's those three who essentially run the Holy Kingdom together, so if you're curious to know more about them, Demiurge's invasion and their encounter with Yaldabaoth, stick around as we're gonna cover all of it.
Alright.
Let's get started.
Alright.
Part 2. The Invasion.
The Invasion.
Covering the rest of Chapter 1 from Volume 12 of the light novel. With the Holy Kingdom's first and last line of defense demolished by Demiurge's magic, the Demi-Human Alliance was able to advance freely. It was an army totaling over 100,000, consisting of various species across 16 races.
It's a huge number, my
Such
god.
a force was enough for the Holy Kingdom to invoke the National Mobilization Order,
The NMO.
calling every trained and able person to the front lines to fight. For a normal kingdom, this would have resulted in one massive army to go against the invaders, but because the kingdom was split by a bay dividing the nation into two, a mobilization of this size typically resulted in both a northern army and a southern one.
Damn geography.
They were two separate divisions responsible for protecting their own sides of the country. The northerners were stationed in the city of Carinthia, while the southerners the city of Debonay. Turns out the south wouldn't see nearly as much action as the north, though, since the invaders were clearly heading to Carinthia. They were making their way to where the Holy Queen was located. Now, normally the Holy Kingdom was ruled by a king, but there were two reasons why the position was given to her. First, she possessed a beauty often considered to be Robol's greatest treasure. Combine that with her charm and determination, and many would consider her to be a real-life saint or angel. The second was her high aptitude as a faith-based magic caster, recognized early on for her proficiency with tier 4 spells by the age of 15.
Yeah, like, so wasn't that the deal? It's like, she's really good at magic, and then it was like, oh god, it's not doing anything.
So, as a prodigy backed by the previous Holy King and the shrines, Kalka had been maintaining her reign ever since.
We're screwed!
Most had no problems with the way she handled it, but there were still people who went to contest it. Coals that were smoldering before Demiurge had even got here. So, it's before we get to the whole club sequence.
Mate, that's just so brutal. I forgot about it. I haven't seen the movie in ages, but like, that was brutal.
Her that Kalka would first be getting consulted by Remedios. This was before the invasion had reached them, and now they were planning on what to do next. Lots of lore was given for what Remedios was wearing, mainly because they were items of legend passed down for generations. Her sword was the sacred sword Saphirlicia, one of the 4 famous holy swords said to be counterparts to the 4 swords of darkness.
I was gonna say it looked very similar to the sword that that guy that didn't even get to attack Irons had.
These swords of darkness were possessed
How do you
by
even
the
hold
13 heroes known as the Dark
The one with the orb.
Knight, a person who could very well have been a player just like Irons.
Oh.
The novel doesn't mention yet why this weapon is so special, but eventually we'll get into what exactly makes it so powerful.
Cool.
Just know where most other people would use it as a crutch, Remedios resolved to only use it when necessary.
Right.
Now, the novel introduces Remedios as not only the commander of the Paladins, but also the strongest one to ever join their ranks, as well as Kalka's close personal friend. In fact, it was her who provided the Queen the military backing she needed to maintain her authority. She was also a recipient of the 9 colors just like Orlando and Pavel. Beside her was her equally prestigious sister Kellart, a high priestess only 2 years younger. As the head of the church and the most powerful priest in the Holy Kingdom, she was capable of casting tier 4 spells as well.
Nice.
What was kept secret from the public, though, was the fact she could actually cast tier 5 too.
Oh.
Why would they do that? Well, everyone agreed it wasn't the best idea to have another prominent figure of power floating around. This could disturb the balance currently held in the kingdom, so it was politically wise to keep Kellert the way she was.
Right,
It's
interesting.
also the reason she never became one of the 9 colors either.
How political.
Still, her and her sister were considered geniuses, and together they were the right and left hand of the queen. Now, there were some nobles who weren't quite fond of their rise to power though, so throughout their reign, they were often subjected to some very harsh criticism. The most common was the way the Custodio sisters worked behind the scenes to bring Kalka up, while the most unfavorable was the suggestion they were all in an inappropriate relationship together.
Oh.
Many
God, people will say anything about anyone just to be like, hey, yeah, let's make weird stuff up because they're cool.
rumors since have been able to be cleared no problem, but it was that last one that they couldn't
Since they were married and never went around with men, they must have been. Oh, okay.
seem to shake no matter how hard they tried. It stuck like glue simply due to the fact all 3 were unmarried and never went around with
I said since they were married, though. As he put a misspelling there. Never mind.
men. To switch things back to the problem at hand, the current leadership wasn't so much worried about the invaders coming to get them, but were rather concerned about how they were going to recover after. Unlike a normal war where the loser pays the winner compensation, beating the demi-humans meant they would get none of that. They did have the option to sell the demi-human gear to other countries, but furnishing the armories of neighbors wasn't the best idea while their own borders were weakened. This brought up the topic of the Sorcerer Kingdom, revealing the Custodio sisters' discontent towards them. Kalka, however, didn't share that same sentiment, since as a fellow sovereign, she couldn't find fault with Ainz's leadership. If he was a king capable of caring for his subjects and giving them peace, then Kalka saw no problem with the Sorcerer Kingdom,
Down with
even
that.
if it was led by an undead. A compassionate undead was a concept the Custodios simply couldn't understand though, so their opinion wasn't going to change no matter what Kalka said.
I mean, they're kind of not wrong to be suspicious, though, are they? But,
In the end, Kalka would just tell them not to badmouth someone they've never met before. When it came to their plan to counter Yaldabaoth, their course of action depended on whether they could predict what the demi-humans were going to do next. Given there were numerous options the demi-humans could choose from, each required its own individual action plan. For the one the kingdom thought was most likely, their main efforts were being put into countering an encirclement. So that much was easy enough to handle, but the main problem lay in figuring out how to handle the demon leading the demi-humans. If they were to take into account the rumors
you ain't gonna deal with him. You can't. You just can't. It's Demiurge.
both had this mysterious power capable of breaching the wall in a single attack, well, that made defending a whole lot harder. To them, there was really no telling
What
on
do you
what
do? You
Yaldabaoth would
can't.
do. Now, while Kalka found all this pretty concerning, Remedios remained unfazed since using her head wasn't her strong point. All she thought about was dispensing justice, and anything else didn't really matter.
Justice.
Her sense of justice wasn't even one with gray areas either, since to her, her idea of it was the only correct one.
Damn.
So, say 2 children, 1 human and 1 demi-human grew up in secret as friends. A regular adult would have a hard time executing the demi-humans,
Oh, right. She just. It's dead. Gone. No problem.
since the human child would be begging for their release. There was always the chance this demi-human grows up and kills a human, but right now they were just as innocent as the human child. So, in this situation, Kalka knew she'd hesitate, but for Remedios, she would kill that demi-human no problem. To her,
Die.
if it was what she believed was the right thing to do, she would do it. If killing numerous demi-humans meant bringing the people of her own kingdom joy, then that to her was a justice she would carry out without so much as a second thought. Sure, it might seem brutal and a little bit savage, but for those that knew Remedios, this was simply the actions of a person who loved people, loved peace, and hated evil. She was a paladin that always wanted to help the helpless. Well, so long as they were human. It was this straightforward mindset that made her so trustworthy, since everything she did from the heart. For Remedios, there was no chance she would ever operate with hidden motives. This was a fresh change compared to what Kalka usually had to deal with, since as an heir with numerous siblings all vying for the throne, it was only natural deceit and quarrel be commonplace. In fact, it was so bad that the only blood relative she could trust was her older brother Caspond. So, it was when Remedios came around to switch things up that was very much like a breath of fresh air for her. The discussion would then continue on about Yaldabaoth. It would briefly mention the crown Calco wears, enabling her to use the great ritual spell only those of her bloodline can use, then proceed into the National Mobilization Order. This was an order not even high-ranking adventurers were immune to, so that gave hope that the kingdom might have enough power to beat Yaldabaoth. I mean, if an adamantite adventurer had done it once before, then who's to say that they couldn't do it either?
Yeah.
They were, after all, on par
It's
with
interesting,
adamantite.
isn't it? Yeah, like, you're thinking that, and then it's like, they don't know. They don't know who he really is! The intrigue, the story! I love Overlord.
Adventurers too. In any case, with all this talk of Yaldabaoth spurring so many different topics, someone pitched the idea that he might be responsible for the missing villagers too. This had happened quite some time ago, but there were a few instances of entire village populations just straight up disappearing. No clues could be found as to where those villagers went, but if anyone was to know, perhaps it was Yaldabaoth. So Remedios figured it was best to interrogate him before they killed him. It was shortly after this that the invasion bell would finally be rung, indicating Yaldabaoth had finally arrived. Not only that, he was already inside the city, tearing through the streets with his army of demons and demi-humans. Needless to say, the news was shocking, since their presence inside meant they had somehow managed to slip past the kingdom's patrol units. So, Calco would quickly give the order to prepare for combat, but
Let's
behind
go.
her confident demeanor, there was this doubt that maybe she was underestimating this demon.
Mm-hmm.
She certainly knew that he was powerful, but what plagued her mind was the thoughts that maybe it was a mistake to think they could win in the first place.
Oh, damn, alright.
She began
She's
to think
really
perhaps
doubting
it
it.
was better
She's really like, okay, we are well in over our heads.
to retreat and gather more intelligence first. This apprehension was quickly dismissed though, since if they didn't fight now, their chances of winning would only get slimmer.
Yep, oh.
Not only that, but a retreat there would only mean the death of a lot of her people. So, in an effort to save lives and fight at what was probably their fullest strength, Calco would order everyone into action. She would deploy a vanguard to buy them time, then have Remedios take the lead in the formal assault to come after. It certainly pained her to have to send the vanguard to their death like that, but as the ruler of the people, it was her job to abandon the minority to save the majority. She understood it was her orders costing people their lives, so in order to honor them, she knew she had to at least play the role she was given perfectly. The thing is, for some reason she couldn't shake the feeling she was making a mistake. So that's a major cutscene prefacing the fight with Yaldabaoth, bringing us now to Remedios' initial encounter with him. It was while on her way to fight him, though, that the bodies of the city's patrol units would be littered everywhere.
God.
Some were still alive with extremely grave injuries, but not because they were lucky or skilled enough to stay so. No, the only reason they were alive was because the demon they faced wanted them to be.
Oh,
Now, despite these soldiers being
that is so nasty. Oh, fucking cruel bastard.
right at death's doorstep, for Remedios leaving them behind wasn't an option. Even if it was to use up the valuable magic her priests and paladins were gonna need in the next fight, Remedios ordered them to save those that they could anyway. She refused to forsake any of the brave soldiers who ended up this way fighting for their country. One of her deputies would actually suggest otherwise, but Remedios, being the hard-headed person she was, refused to hear any other option. She would have her men treat the wounded, even if it meant putting themselves at a disadvantage later. It was once that was done that Remedios would put up the signal for all the units to gather around her. There were about 500 paladins belonging to her order specifically, most of which could hold their own against level 20 monsters, while some were even strong enough to take on level 60s. It was the best 25 of them that formed Remedios' core unit. Not all the paladins were to join her in her fight against Yaldabaoth though, as about 300 of them were sent to the wall to deal with the demi-humans. Normally it would have been better to operate as one massive army, but the kingdom didn't want a repeat of what happened earlier. They couldn't risk making themselves a massive target for Yaldabaoth. Now, there was a small bit of preparations before Remedios would engage Yaldabaoth in the square, but that only involved basic organization and spellcasting. It was when they moved into where Yaldabaoth was waiting that Demiurge wouldn't even get the chance to point out the red carpet he made for them. Remedios would attack just like how we saw in the
Oh,
anime,
I
seeing
see. So
instantly
yeah, he's just covered in blood to try and beat. Oh, he's so sick. I love it.
just how powerful her opponent was. She knew that if even she, the strongest warrior in the entire country, couldn't land a hit, then her fellow paladins wouldn't be able to either. That being the case, what she needed now was mage support. It was support that would actually come from her sister Kellart, since it was while Kalka and Demiurge were talking that Kellart would prepare support magic just for her. She would secretly buff Remedios in a way that boosted all her offensive stats. Of course, Demiurge spotted it instantly, but he couldn't care less as the outcome would remain the same.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
regardless.
It does not
If
matter.
anything, it would only create more despair for when she was inevitably defeated. It's then that Demiurge could tell Remedios was still on edge, so in an attempt to make things go more smoothly, he would actually promise not to attack first, until their conversation with
How about we say that I won't attack until either our conversation is over or someone from your side attacks first?
was over or someone from their side attacked instead. Demiurge had promised not to do anything. Remedios obviously had a tough time believing anything a demon said, but with Kalka ordering her to stand down, as upsetting as it was, she had no choice but to listen. It's then Kalka would ask why Demiurge had come alone, a question to which he would answer with two very simple reasons.
Okay.
The first was to induce despair by beating their army alone, and the second was to avoid the same mistake he made in the Riestes Kingdom. He wanted to see if anyone as strong as Momon was here.
Oh.
It was when he confirmed out loud that no one present was even remotely close to him that didn't sit too well with Remedios. It was a taunt that would eventually lead to her first true engagement with him. So, alongside 5 Tier 3 Flame Archangels, 20 Tier 2 Angel Guardians,
Jesus.
and 1 Tier 4 Principality Piece, Remedios would be the only paladin to attack with them. There were actually 5 adventurers hidden in this assault as well, but they remained invisible to everyone, including Remedios. That being the case, their ambush was just as much a surprise to her as it was to everyone else, but ultimately meaningless as Demiurge would take care of them
Yeah, of
easily.
course. Demiurge's just the man. He's just the man. Well, he's the D-man.
He didn't even need to turn around to handle them, as the emergence of his wings would skewer them for him. The fact they even got that close was a testament to their power, but Demiurge's handling of it showed he was even stronger. So, the fight would then continue exactly as how we saw, up until the angels would tackle him altogether. Since individually their attacks clearly did nothing, at the very least they could limit Yaldabaoth's movements. It was the optimal way to use them against an opponent like this. This would seemingly distract Demiurge enough to make an opening, but not so much that she could use her sword's ultimate attack yet. As an attack that used all its power and could only be used once a day, the opening she saw wasn't quite the right one yet. Instead, Remedios would hit him with her second most powerful attack. Now, while the anime shows him going flying from what looks like the impact, Remedios knew that that wasn't the case at all. While everyone else thought the same, as the person who made contact, she knew that Demiurge had flown away on his own accord.
Oh.
He had absorbed her powerful blow simply by flying away from her. Unfortunately, destroying the building wasn't going to be enough to deal with Demiurge either, since
Whoa.
even she could survive that with the enchanted armor she was wearing. So, really, all Remedios had done here was make the fight more difficult for them. The next move after was to start a holy flame rite, since even if the fire didn't work, at least the holy effects would do damage. It was before anyone could get that started, though, that Yaldabaoth would re-emerge, this time in his true form. It was a terrifying sight that finally started to make Remedios feel fear. Even so, Remedios would charge anyway, knowing if she didn't, she would be forced to admit defeat. Still, defeat would come all the same, as her sword, forged from an unknown metal harder than adamantite, couldn't do anything to stop Yaldabaoth.
Aluminum.
He wasn't even paying attention to her, so what should have been an
Or
opponent
is it
she could
mithril?
take on just like the adamantite adventurer before her, revealed she was in fact nothing like him. She thought perhaps there was a trick to this demon's invincibility, but when no one came bringing the answer to what that was, escape was the only option left. It actually didn't even matter if the Holy Queen died right here either, since so long as Kellart survived herself, the Queen could always be revived later. As long as her body was recoverable, then that would remain an option to them. Unfortunately, such an option disappeared instantly,
Yeah.
and along with it, all the hope Remedios had for Kalka. You see, where she believed Kalka was safe, what with all the priests around her capable of casting healing magic, Yaldabaoth's teleportation placed an impenetrable wedge between them. Next came that gruesome weapon scene, which,
God.
aside from an additional swing at a soldier who was charging towards them, it pretty much remained the brutally same moment we saw in the anime.
God, so
The
bad.
conscious Kalka might have been able to protect herself with a shield of chi or mana, but neither were available given the first impact knocked her out.
Jesus.
So, in the end, the fight would be brought to a halt by a mix of indecision and necessity. Remedios and her paladins couldn't figure out what to do next, while Yaldabaoth needed to break open the wall for his army which just arrived. It was before he would leave, though, that he would first part with the same gift Demiurge had left them, a starfall that no one could even react to. That's pretty much it for Demiurge's incredibly bold move here, so as the end to what was essentially the prologue, now we can finally get into the first act of the movie. That's what we'll get into next video, so expect that one in about a week or so. In the meantime, feel free to check out my Lord of Mysteries videos. The dub just came out and it's actually amazing. But anyway, if you liked what you saw, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then be sure to subscribe. Until next time, though. Ciao.
Ciao. Yeah, cool. Love that. I do want to do the Lord of Mysteries cut content, but I haven't started watching it yet, so it makes no sense to do that. But as we get into August, uploads are going to be like tripled. So I'm going to be watching stuff, checking stuff out, reacting. We got the shorts. I'm doubling the shorts. So they're going to be like, the plan is to have 2 shorts, 2 videos every day in August. That's the plan, to catch up with everything and keep up to date with everything. Boom, we're in. And I'm going to be adding stuff to the background as well. Like, I want to get rid of this pillar of Funkos here and put like a weird like multi-light there, and then like posters on the top, and then, but we'll see. I'm being very slow moving into this house that I own. But yeah, thanks so much.